Let's call our meeting to order. I've been informed we do have a quorum present. And can conduct business and take action in our meeting. We have a relatively short agenda today. Item number 2 under action items, first one on the list is review approval of minutes from the 3/21/23 meeting, which was enclosed in your packet. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review those. So when someone is comfortable, we'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Move approval.
Mayor Gordon has made the motion. Do we hear a second? Judge Hamilton, I believe, raised his hand to second the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? All in favor of the motion signify by aye.
Aye.
Or raising your hand. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Thank you. Number 2 under action items is review and approve financial reports for February through May, which is also enclosed in the packet, and Colin is going to share with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So just after the minutes are our financial reports, and it's been a while since we met, so we've got 3 months covered there. If you pay attention, we've got the main thing to get from this is in February. At the end of February, we were at 78% expended on our annual budget, and then where we had some funding source issues, we scaled down and we cut our expenses by a lot to finish out the year. So if you see February, we're at 78% expended, and then in March we were at almost 82%, so we only went up 4% there. And then April, we were at 84%. And then at the end of May, we're at 87. So across those 4 months, we only expended about 9% of our total budget for the year. So that helped us to keep a little bit extra going into the next funding cycle, which is this year. So we had used all of our adult expenditures by the end of May. Our youth was expended at 111%, but we received additional funding on that. Our administrative expenses were at 95%. Our dislocated worker was at 42%, but most of those funds were transferred so that we could cover all of our adult expenditures. That they allow us to transfer between adult and dislocated worker as needed. So that was where we're at the end of May. We had covered all of our work experience requirements. There's a requirement to spend 20% of youth funds on work experience. So we had fully covered that requirement by the end of May. And again, we were at 87% expended in May overall on our budget. And that's compared to 84% in the prior year.
Okay.
So, if you have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions regarding the report for May, or excuse me, February through May? Entertain a motion to approve the report.
Judge Williams, we need Judge West back to approve anything.
Sorry, I
Because
didn't notice he'd gone.
Yeah, I think he must have just gone inside because he got out of his vehicle.
Okay, we'll pause for just a moment then. Perfect time for anyone to ask any questions. David's, there he is. I see your smiling face. Are we required to have your smiling face on before we can count him?
Yes.
Yes, you are, yeah.
That must have been the lawyer in the group.
There
he is.
We lost you, Judge. Welcome back.
Uh-oh. It's on mute.
He's on mute.
You're on mute, so we can't hear you, sir.
But we can see you.
I'm sorry, I said Delta Gas has to change your gas meters out at your homes. And this is the only time in month.
There he is.
So you're at home watching over the gas meter installation?
That's where I am. But I'm avidly listening.
Colin had finished his report and asked if there was any questions. Do you have any questions before we move on, sir? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the finance report for February through May.
I'll make that motion.
Judge Hamilton has made the motion.
I'll second.
Judge West looks like he really wants a second, and he does. Again, one more time, are there any questions or comments regarding the report? All in favor of the motion signify by either saying aye or raising your hand. Anyone opposed? The motion carries. We'll move to item number 3, review and approval of the budget for fiscal year 24. Which is also included in our packet, and Michael Bushman is going to share with us regarding that.
Colin, I was gonna have Colin, give his first chance here and review the budget as a workforce accountant.
Yep.
That works.
Yeah, so flip on to the next page. After all those reports, we've got our fiscal year 24 budget. If you look at the very top, we've got a list of allocations. We've got a carryover from 23 that we've got estimated, listed out there. We've got it spread across the 4 different funding sources for admin, adult, dislocated worker, and youth. You can see those split out across those 4 segments. And then on the far right is the total budgeted amount. And then we also have our fiscal year 24 allocation, which those are estimates right there. If you scroll down below there, our operating costs, everything under operating costs until you get to program delivery costs is what the ad will be expected to use this year. And then everything below that, for our program delivery costs and one-stop operator costs, those are going to be what Equus in the Career Centers is going to be using. So as you go through on the far right, that budget line item, on the far right, it's probably best for you to look at. We've got the budget line, and then next to that is the fiscal year 23 projected. So on the far right, next to that, the fiscal year 23 projected, that is the close estimate of what we're gonna expect to have finished 23 as our total number on each of these items. So for example, in operating costs, we're expecting 667,000 operating on staff. And then you compare that with what we've got budgeted, which we're at about 697,000 on staff on the budget there. So as you go down, you can kind of just see where we kind of got the numbers. They're kind of roughly based on 23, but we had to scale down on a few items. For example, in the program delivery costs, we reduced Equus staff down from 23 to 9, and so you can see that reflected in our budget amount there. So you have less staff travel, less staff salaries in general. So if anybody has any questions at all about what's going on with the budget there, please let me know.
So your you program delivery calls, the first line item that says staff, that's
Yes,
the staff,
correct.
okay.
That's right. Operating is the ad and program delivery is Equus.
Mayor, yes, ma'am.
When do you expect the final audited numbers for fiscal year 23?
For 23, well,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It
we've
says
got the final
projected.
audit, correct?
Yes, these are projected year-end expenses. So the audit, we won't even start field work until probably August at the earliest, maybe September. So actual audited numbers probably would not take place until end of October or November is when an audit for fiscal year 23 would take place.
Okay, so
But
we'll
we'll
know
have,
the final numbers for fiscal year 23.
So are you, and I'll just clarify, so are you wanting like from the audit firm or actually the closed book numbers for fiscal year 23?
The closed book
So we'll have
numbers.
those by the joint in September, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah, we'll have
So you're
our,
talking about closed
yes.
books of July.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, this is all projected.
Yes,
so
correct.
I understand that. I just want to know when we would see those final numbers.
Yes, no, we'll have final numbers ready by the close of this next month. But in terms of like actual going through an audit, independent auditor, that's the several months through November.
And I thought this was maybe because I think you were thinking about like an actual audit, like our
Yes,
page coming
yes,
into
yes.
it. And I think the mayor was just talking about the final closed books numbers.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll have those next month. And then definitely at the joint board meeting in September, we'll be able to give the final numbers. So the FY 24 allocation, that top line, that's what we're getting from the state, and we're relatively confident in those numbers. We've already got the youth numbers have been verified for the NFA. We're just waiting on the final verification for the adult workers. The thing that may change some is that second line, which is the fiscal year 23 carryover. And when they do get the June books closed out next month, that 601,000 could change a little bit. It could go down some. Is that accurate, Michael?
Yes, most likely will actually change, because this original estimate, we weren't given, basically, verification from the state that we would have money to cover some of those overages in September of 2022. So that carryover reflects that. So once we have everything moved back into workforce, that number will most likely, the carryover will most likely reduce. The good thing about this budget and, the way that we report financially with workforce, it's actually, it's basically a living document. So we do have adjustments, we have, allocation changes. We put that real time in each month. So we could actually see that in, when we start doing July, August, and so on. We do reflect when we do have changes to carryover, when we do have additional allocations and so on. The one thing I also will note is that these, the program delivery costs and one-stop operator, because of the way things shook out at the end of the year, these are kind of rough estimates, and we're very aware of that. We want to make sure that you're aware of that. We worked with Equus, and we would have, we'll let you know that these line items were basically these were based off of our allocation percentage last year, as well as utilization from them last year. So this was our internal budget for program delivery cost and one-stop operator. So most likely they will have changes, and we will actually present that when those are finalized between Equus and Bluegrass Ad. And then we would present that as such, as this is an amended, true budgeted form once we have all of our allocations in place.
Thank you, George.
So considering the next line item is review and approval of approval of the budget, do that now, even though we know the numbers are going to change.
So we know the specific line items will change. One thing I will also let you know, so the total that we've contracted and given to Equus is the total, it's the addition of the program delivery cost, the 1,475,498, plus the one-stop operator cost total of 100,744. That is the total that we have given to Equus. Now, the individual line items where they think they're going to need that total amount, that's going to shift, but the total amount that is given to them will not.
Okay, that number won't change.
Yes.
Okay. How it's used, and that's their choice.
That's up to them, exactly. How they think they best will utilize the funds that are given to them.
Okay.
And if you'll see the second to last line there, the total reserved FY 24 funds, it's $516,072.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that is the amount that we're setting aside this year and not budgeting. So that, this year, we had the lack of funds last year, we had to roll into this year pretty much with not a lot of carryover at all.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're withholding about 516,000. So that next year, when we get to this point, we can budget going forward, we have some carryover. We're building in a carryover, basically. So if something were to adjust from, say, that 601,000 went down, where you would see that reflected in the change in the budget is the 516,000 may drop if the 601 drops to the top. So that it won't affect what we've already told Equus that their amount will be. So that's where that shift would occur. So that the budget numbers that you're approving today will be what carries forward into the fiscal year.
So is this 516,072 number, is that like a built-in fund balance for the budget that you expect to be left over? Or is it built in to spend?
No, it's built into carry forward. It's so that next year we don't start at zero or a deficit. We actually start with some funding to do programs, so that we're not having to wait for an additional allocation.
Right. There's no disruptions that way.
Right, because this year, we had the disruption in service because we didn't have that carry forward money, because that was part of the problem with the budgeting process last year, is when we gave Equus the numbers, we overestimated what the carryover was, and that was the problem. So that's why we had to discontinue a lot of our services back in February and do some of the drastic measures we did to make it through this year. What this money will allow us to do is kind of have a built-in next year, so when we get there, we're not starting from zero. So we did reduce some of the services we're gonna do, so we can have this cushion. So instead of it taking us, 2-3 years to get back to where we were before that accounting issue, we're really gonna take one lean year, and operate lean, and then next year we should be really close, because also next year, we'll have an additional $400,000 that was reallocated this year for the funds that the state gave us. And then we also had a 10% reduction this year, so that also gives us some cushion that we've got money to work with next year.
So it's actually built into the budget.
Yes,
Yes.
and that's,
I understand that, because we have what we call a built-in fund balance.
Sure.
Okay.
I think it's the same thing. Tell me again how you determined that number, the
So,
516.
so where that really came from was, we had originally said that we're gonna set back, I think the original number was like 200,000 of the initial allocation we got from the state. We thought we're gonna withhold this first 200,000, because that at least gives us something to provide services with come next July, next August, before we get the money from the state. So the rest of that is any money that we see carrying forward, that we do end up with left over this year. Because we are gonna have some carryover funds, because where we did stop so much in February, and we did put the brakes on, that did save us some funds. So there is a little bit that'll carry forward. So that's where that number is kind of a fluid number, because if, for example, when this was created on June 5th, that was 601 is what we were adjusting. That number is probably gonna go down. I mean, I think we can pretty well safely say that number's gonna go down. So that 516 number is probably gonna go down as well. And that's just the money that I said that we're hoping for next year, that gives us a good carryover place to start with, aside from the other funds that we don't use this year. So that next year we don't start behind the 8 ball, because like right now, even though we're in a new fiscal year, we still don't have that cash on hand to be able to do some of the programs, to put people in training programs, to put people in work-based learning. We don't have those funds yet. So this way, next year, we won't be starting from zero, waiting on that money from the state to get here.
but simply put, it really is, that 516 you're referring to is really just the total allocations of that 3.4 million less total expenses. That's all that is. And it's just carry over to use in the next fiscal year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And may I ask, any of the issues we've had with the formal audit with RFH, is there any indication or any adjustments to the budget based on what we've seen in the draft audit results?
No, I mean, really, we reflected this budget, or this, because of the findings in there. We had to obviously greatly reduce kind of our expenses and what we were budgeting with program for Equus. That's why we're holding to that strict, 1.5 million that we've given them is much less than what we have given in the past 2 years. But, again, just to be fully transparent, what we gave in the past 2 years was greatly overstated. It was much more than what we had available to give them. But no, nothing from the audit has really changed, my budgeting process. We just know we're on top of our numbers now. It's kind of a thing.
And if I may, in close, given, I know Judge West and Judge Hamilton have been in executive board meetings where we've talked about that law.
Right.
In several meetings. Eric Gordon has not had the opportunity to
Sure.
hear the explanation of what we're changing to make sure we don't
Sure.
have that same problem. Would you mind, either of you?
Of course, yeah.
Both of you sharing, taking a few minutes to share?
Of course. Well, specifically for this problem, we had procedures and policies in place for budgeting. We just did not have something, an internal control basically in place to ensure that they were being followed or done. So we had a procedure and process for the accounting and tracking of all these funds. There was just no way to ensure that they were being done. So something that we've kind of built internally is we now have a master, like a checklist, essentially, that it not only captures what the workforce accountant, but it has what the aging accountant does, it has what the community planning, what's due. It basically, essentially anything administrative or accounting wise that's due month by month basis is now tracked on a spreadsheet. That's done, and we have a segregation of duties on there, where we have a primary and secondary who's in charge of each one of those responsibilities. We also have a two checklist, essentially. So we have the person that performs that responsibility, and then someone that reviews it, and then me as a final check off. On top of that, that is then now signed and reviewed by David. And then we're also going to pass along to the board chair or the board treasurer each month, and they're going to review that checklist as well. So that's just another way to ensure that those things are being done. And again, obviously, if new responsibilities or things come up, we'll add it to the checklist. But that is one way that we have to kind of track and make sure those are being done. Now, in terms of the policies and procedures, those haven't changed because again, those were actually pretty accurate as what should have been performed each month. But now this is just a way to ensure that they are being performed.
So if I might ask, and thank you, Judge, for bringing that up. So the new procedures and checks are not in policy?
We have policies and procedures already in place for the job duties and what they're required. We just didn't really have good internal controls to ensure that they were being followed, if that makes sense.
And so where are the internal controls reflected in case everybody here drops dead the same day?
No.
God forbid, and someone takes over. Where are they reflected?
So that checklist I'm referring to, I created. I also have, on that same checklist, each one of the responsibilities, there is a document next to it, a training document. So it has how each of those jobs are performed, as well as training videos. So they can click, basically, and it's shared with David, it's shared with HR. Each one, that's something that we review monthly as an administrative team. So that's something that is shared amongst all the accountants, all the staff essentially on the second floor, again, as well as David, as well as HR. The program directors as well. So Amy, before Mike, she was aware of the checklist that I started, and so she had access and she could view it. Same thing with Celeste for aging, and Shane for community planning. So they're all able to see these checklists. And again, each one of those items has a written document and a video to show how it's performed and how you do that responsibility.
Okay.
So one of the great things that Michael's done, and we've really bragged on a lot, is he's not just a checklist, but he actually went in and recorded himself performing each task. So that, if a staff person is like reviewing the document, they're still struggling with a little bit, they can actually click on the video and Michael walks them step by step through how to do that process. So as we all, kind of what we say is if Michael gets hit by a bus on the way to work, then somebody can go in and watch for step by step for every action. There's a training video they can watch.
And it's somewhere required, somewhere it's stated that it's required for
You
people
saying
to take this? I mean, I'm looking for what the final control is. I mean, what happens if I'm an employee and I decide not to do the checklist?
Well, that's something that I will review.
You are the person who has to oversee.
I
everybody who
directly
does the
oversee.
checklist.
Correct. Yes. So the staff are, again, each one of the tasks, there is a primary person that's assigned that task.
Okay.
So if they cannot do it, there's also a secondary person who's on the list as well to perform that task as well.
Okay.
But yeah, that is up to me to make sure that is done and performed. It's signed off by the person when they perform it. then it's also signed off by me when I review that individual task and I approve that it's been done and performed. And then on top of that, in totality, the month is reviewed and signed by David. So if there's something missing, if I haven't signed off as a secondary review, that's a flag to him. That's something that I've talked with him many times. It's a way to kind of check and make sure the CFO's doing their job as well. It's something that, there really wasn't a whole lot of oversight on my seat when I first came in. Like I was pretty transparent with the auditors. I could have done many different things. But that's something I share with David is you need to have a way to review what I'm doing as well. And that's kind of my checklist and my proof of here's what we did for the month.
It's a good thing you're honest.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty early on. We had conversations, Mike and David and I, about, there's a lot of lapses in kind of what was going on.
Well, I do appreciate all the work that you've done and others to bring this to fruition.
Yep.
So,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, are you comfortable at this point? You need us to vote on this proposed budget? That's the action we need to take on.
Yeah, we'll need a motion to accept this budget as it is, and then at September, at the joint board meeting, we'll have a finalized, after the books are closed, budget for you in September to vote on as well. So this is just approving the budget as is, and then we'll have an amended budget for you in September. That's just kind of letting you know.
Okay, and we'll need to approve that as well.
Yeah, that'll get approved in September.
Understand. We'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 24 budget.
Move approval.
Mayor Gordon has made the motion to approve. To hear a second. Let's just have a conversation
I think he's having a conversation with people putting in the.
It's like reality TV. We're right there with you.
the Columbia Gas. I think it's appropriate. I can second the motion. It's okay for me to do that, so I will let the record reflect that I second the motion. I'll ask one time: are there any questions regarding the document and proposed fiscal year 24 budget for anyone? Judge Hamilton, you have any questions?
No, sir. No, sir. I'm good.
Thank you, sir. Judge West?
In the basement.
Whatever you're doing, he's having fun.
Yeah, it's a window into his life, isn't it?
We're getting grand work.
Judge West, are you prepared to vote on the budget proposal? We'll give you a minute.
I think that's coming by the
Sit
basement.
down. I have no idea where he is right now.
We're all voyeurs, right?
That's where he wants his gas line, right there.
There's a Columbia Gas guy right beside him. I'm not sure he can hear us. Judge West? We're voting on the proposed budget. Are you comfortable voting with this? We have a motion and a second to approve the proposed fiscal year 24 budget.
I have been listening, and yes, I approve.
Thank you, sir. All in favor of the motion signify as Judge West has. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Next is item 4, under action items, annual review and approval of the direct service provider and one-stop operator. Not sure who's going to share with us.
So,
Stacy looks like she wants
I
to.
think Stacy is the, yeah.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi. Okay. Well, as you know, every 3 years we bid out, but right now I think this is the last year we can do a carryover for approval, and this is just updates what the what we said is the goals for the direct service provider, as well as the budget, and it's just a one sheet amendment to the current contract, updating that information. And with your approval, with the provided it's approved, you guys will sign it since you're there. Yay. And we will get that submitted to the direct service provider for filing and carry over for next year, because they've been so wonderful and understanding with us as we've gone through all these things that Michael and Colin has been talking about. So
Make sure I understand, are we approving continuing the relationship?
yes, this is to extend their contract for an additional year.
An additional fiscal year?
Yes,
Or
it technically,
5-on-1 of 23?
we're within the 30-day grace period, but it is within, it technically started on July 1st, but we're within the grace period of it.
Okay, and it would go through June 30th of 24?
Correct.
Correct, okay.
Yeah.
Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Mayor Gordon. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Are there any other questions or comments? Anyone have any questions for Stacy?
Stacy, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Being that it relates to Jennifer and myself, I'm under the impression that there is still another year after this. So you all may want to look into that. I think 25 is the required year.
I can check on that. I was thinking on the sheet that it would have ended, but it may have been that when it said 24, it actually meant that that last year would be the next year to carry through till 25.
Okay,
so
just wanted to check for our information, because I was thinking 25 is the required year for the rebid.
Yeah, and that may very well be the case, but we're only dealing with this fiscal year right now on that. So that's that's something that I'll look into. No problem.
Thanks so much.
Does that mean indeed that this time next year we'll do the same thing, extend another year?
Yeah, I'll double check the dates on that. Todd is probably right, because like I said, all I recall is that it said 24. So I was thinking this would have been the last year, but it may be that the beginning of the fiscal year next year would be the last year before we have to rebid it out again. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with this particular contract. This is only an amendment to extend it for this year. I'll definitely check the other, though, to make sure that we can extend it next year. If not, we will prepare to bid out with the hopes that that they will continue to provide submissions to continue.
Todd seems pretty certain that there's going to be another year.
And he is probably right. I'm sure he probably pays closer attention to that than I do. So, but yeah, I will definitely double check that.
Okay, thank you. So does anyone else have any questions or comment? And Todd, anything else you would like to share before we vote?
No, sir.
All in favor of the motion signify by aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No one is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Next is item number 5, updated policies of the work experience program enclosed in the packet, and Tiffany is going to share with us regarding that.
Okay, so the first one is the work-based learning policy. And what it is me and Rowley had talked to Stacy about wanting to combine our work experience policy, our transitional employment policy, and our internship policy all together because they have the same parameters. And Stacy pulled it all together beautifully. The first few pages literally are nothing but definitions, right? That's all that it is. So technically, this is a new policy, right? But it's, the only information in there is combining our 3 policies together into one. So that's that one. I'll wait and see if you all have any questions on it.
Let me ask a dumb question.
No, there's no dumb question.
Who is required to follow the policy?
Our direct service provider and us making sure, because the parameters in this, the definitions and the law within this, make sure that we don't have a disallowed cause connected to a work experience, an internship, or transitional employment. So the policies are, I mean, that's what, we pull them straight from the law, adapt them to our area, right? Because like, okay, so our work-based policy has 400 and, Lord, I've just forgot the hours of it, how many?
480.
Up to 480 hours is what here in the Bluegrass we do. However, like in Northern Kentucky, they do 520, right? In Eastern Kentucky, they do 200, at KSEP, they do 200 and something. So that's what we have, and it's we meet with businesses and things like that to discuss what would be a good set of hours that you feel individuals could pick up the skills needed to be successful in the position.
So I guess the federal law and state law allows
Yes.
us the flexibility for each area development
Yes.
district and whatever they're called in Utah or California, wherever, to make those choices themselves as to what is the appropriate policy.
Yes.
Everything associated with the policy, or is there a template that we start with?
What do you mean, is there a template?
Well, so this policy, I assume, has been in place for various.
Well, there were 3 separate ones, yes. There was
Right,
the
for a long
work
time.
experience, the transitional, and the internship, right? So there was 3 and they were combined into the one.
Okay.
So the state gives us a general overview of a template of what it should look like.
Okay.
So the state gives us policies that we can have to follow. We can make it more stringent, we can change some of the language, so that when the state puts out a policy, they'll look very, very familiar to this.
Okay.
And then we kind of take this to do our policy. So when the state will come to monitor us each year, one of the things they're gonna look at is like, so for example, if with Tiffany, like the reference to people in work-based learning for this policy, they're gonna go look and say, okay, well, we put Michael in a work-based learning program. They're gonna make sure he didn't exceed whatever guidelines we put in here.
Okay.
We customize it based on our workforce area. So like, for instance, like in our area, obviously you all know that manufacturing is pretty heavy here in Bluegrass. So we take a lot of the information that we hear from our local employers, our local areas here in the Bluegrass, and we kind of determine, like, that's how we came up with the 480 hours based on some of the information we got from employers, like, hey, look, why don't we push, because before it used to be 320, and then we had bumped it up a while back to 480. But ours, there's, like Mike said, the state has a certain parameter that we kind of mirror it off of, and we got to keep those parameters. But then we get a little bit more in depth here in the local area as far as what it should look like and what makes sense for our area. Because what makes sense here may not make sense in Northern Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky and whatnot.
And if you look on the first page of this policy, you can see that it includes, it says for adult dislocated worker and unhappy laborful information regarding guidance used to create this policy. So they actually, it's listed out every federal guidance that we use to build this policy.
Okay.
So that kind of shows our compliance with the federal requirements and the state requirements. So for example, it talks about all of the TEGLs and the WIOA. It references parts of the law that we use to build our policy. So that's why every area has their own set of policies, but you always have to refer back to those federal policies to make sure you're in compliance with federal law.
Okay. Well, here's the test. What does TEGL stand for? What's the acronym?
Training Employment's Guidance Letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lisa and I developed a tingle for the house for my husband to
Oh
figure
my
out how we're gonna do
Uh,
some certain things, so I don't have to pick his socks up anymore.
yeah,
I know, we've had contract negotiations and everything about it.
Is it working out for
And
you?
you're still married.
No, it's still, been married 29 years this October, and I'm still in contract negotiations.
Anybody to follow the policy?
Yeah.
The policy may not be renewed this year though, so.
There's
Sounds like a real possibility.
But yeah, so, and here's the thing too, like, whenever the local areas develop policies, even where this, or even the state, you can be, you've got the federal law, right, WIOA, and they have guidelines in there as to how you develop your policies. So the state could come down and say, we're gonna make a work-based learning policy more strict, right? But you can't go, it can't be
It can't be less.
less, it can be more strict. And then the local area goes with the federal and the state, looks at the federal and the state and says, okay, we're gonna see if we can mirror, how can we do this? Because we can't do a policy that is less than what they put in place either. So it's,
So an example
I
would
say
be
it's
that
3 different checks and balances is how I see
the
it.
feds could say, like, you have to, document something within 10 days. Well, the state can come back and say, well, we're gonna say you have to document it within 5 days.
And they can.
We could come back, and we actually did come back and say, well, you're gonna document it within 3 days.
Right.
So we couldn't say 11 days, we couldn't go less than the federal, but
Right.
we could be more stringent,
Mhm.
and we have in a couple of things. So that's the first policy, is the work-based learning.
Yes, okay,
Do
so
do
there's,
we need to vote on these individually?
I know with the
Or are you
WIOA,
just sharing this, and they're, obviously, since they're listed under action items, you need to vote on.
They do
will.
not, they do not need to be done individually. You can, as long, you can approve them or not approve them or make exceptions to the entire group.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you're perfectly fine. Okay, so then, you ready for the next one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so on the supportive service policy, right, you will go on page 3 of the supportive service policy, there's a little highlighted section there, right, in that very top paragraph. The only thing that we change with this is staff of the administrative entity will review the documentation, providing final approval for supportive service. And the way that that'll work is whenever any of the direct service providers, like Jennifer, let's say that we have a TDS who wants to do a gas card for one of their participants, right? They will put their information in the state data management system, which is Key Suite, and then Jennifer or Kevin will look at it because they're their leadership on Equus side. And then they will send it up to me and say, hey, does this look good? Then I get in there and make sure that they've got everything done in the Key Suite system. I check and make sure it's another check and balance on making sure we keep our money straight. I'll reach out to Colin and say, hey, how are we on adult funds? Right, and then I'll email them back and say, yes, it's approved or not. That's the only thing, it's just another check and balance on that one. And then the other part that's highlighted is on page 4. At some point, we dismissed the fact our actual supportive service policy is for 1,500, and it just had 1,200 in there. That was what it used to be. So we just needed to update that number.
Okay.
And everything, I know whenever we discussed these with the WIB, they wanted to make sure like what the paper trail is, and the documentation of something that's been approved, it's always in email. Jennifer can even tell you if we discuss something, and then I always send her an email per our conversation, right? Documentation is key for us.
I got a trick question for Colin.
Trick question.
You said you would check with Colin.
I will, to make sure that the money's there and everything's still good.
So, Colin, I guess, the question, how I would phrase it would be, can you answer that question on any given day, or can you answer that question and say, well, as of last Friday, or as of the 15th of July, or how would you answer that question?
So what we do, so whenever we wrap up each month, we update a spreadsheet that tracks all of our grants and their funds. And so every month, in addition to this, we have to report to the state what our current funding is.
Okay.
And so that matches, and then the spreadsheet matches, and the spreadsheet is based off of what our books are, that our expenses that come out of our books show. So we apply those numbers, and it accurately shows, okay, this adult grant that ends, 6/30 of '23 still has $11,000, but then the next grant, is open and it runs until 2024. You just kind of look and pick and choose which ones are still active. And as of June 30th, I've got our current numbers of what's available, basically. And so I can get that accurate. And then if a certain funding stream is very low, and I know I can go and look and see, have we spent a lot already this month? I can just kind of determine that no, we don't have it in that stream, but maybe we've got another right here. So in general, I know as of the end of the last month, and then if it's really close, I can quickly go in and see,
You can take a snapshot and have a pretty good idea.
get an idea, can we do this $500 project or
Is
not?
going and.
Yeah, so, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Yes, okay.
Yes, it does. I'm just curious.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually part of the process that we're following in Michael's spreadsheet. So it's a monthly process. We update where our funding status is on the, we call it the budget analysis spreadsheet.
So I'll ask you, an employee supervisor kind of question. Are you subject to get that call from Michael on any given day and say, hey, checking in on you, how much money you got? That's something is that kind of a possible conversation that you all might have anytime?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, workforce related, definitely would reach out and see what is, budget analysis look like. That's the first place we go, is the spreadsheet, just because it tracks between the three systems. It's not just our books, it compares the state system with our system to make sure everything's correct.
Yeah.
So.
And that budget analysis is one of the things that was being tracked before we had our funding issues the last couple of years, where our budget got all messed up. And we have since the audit and everything, we've got that picked back up. And so that's the thing that's the hinge point of the issue, was that budget analysis was not fully updated. So and then when we reported things, the state didn't catch certain things too. And so it got confused. So we didn't know exactly how much we had left, right? But then now that we've got this, we've been using this for the last 6-7 months or so, we're completely back up. We can tell you, very quickly whether or not we've got funding in certain areas. So we've got very accurate data on that now.
And we had the requirement to, as you said, a monthly report to the state.
Yes.
And they never raised their hand and said, no.
It also gives us a little bit, one of the reasons for adding this in is, so every expenditure, whether it be for a training account, whether it be for work-based learning, for supportive services, Tiffany, that'll come to Tiffany or someone to approve. So we're gonna be able to real time, we're gonna know like how many requests we've had that month. We're gonna have a really good idea of what we spent. And part of the reason we kind of put that stopgap in place is, and they all make fun of me, but like I've been using the whole analogy of it's rice and beans and beans and rice. When you're budgeting at home, you've got to watch every dollar and make sure that you've got more money than you've got month. So what this allows us to do is, by approving every single expense like that, we're able to very accurately keep track of how much money we've got, how much is left, and know where we're at real time. Because previously we would have the expenditure that would come in at the end of the month, and we would see what we spent that month. There should be no surprises now, because we're going to be approving every supportive service expense, every ITA expense. Tiffany's going to pre-approve everybody that's put into work-based learning. We're going to know exactly how many people we've approved that month. So when the bill comes in at the end of the month, we pretty much already know what that's gonna look like for the major expensive items. So it just gives us yet another mechanism to control and monitor the cash flow.
Thanks, everyone. I'm sorry. I
You're
interrupted.
fine.
No, that's the kind of questions we
You're
can.
fine.
That,
Actually, questions are good.
Yeah.
It always annoys me when there's no questions, because I'm just like, are y'all really listening?
I was-
I'm sorry.
yeah, and then also, we just wanna make sure that we've got accurate control in place. And by
Yeah.
discussing it, it kind of makes us think through our processes and make sure it's good.
Mhm.
That's, questions like that are, how we kind of build our control. A simple test you do is what could go wrong? And any control, like how could this go wrong? And that's something that, questions like that are kind of what lead to better processes, so. Yep. We welcome it, for sure.
Yeah.
Like getting ideas.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, we ready for the next one?
Yes, ma'am.
So on the individual, the ITA, the individual training account, on page 1, it's the same. Staff of the administrative entity will review the documentation, providing final approval of the ITA. And then on page 2, it was just another one that we just needed to update about the supportive service. It had the old amount of where it was the $600 per year additionally for up to 2 years. Technically, our supportive service is $1,500. So that's what that one is.
So does that mean at one time the right number was $600?
Several years back, right, it was 600, and then, Lord Stacy, when was, because I know we looked to make sure that it all been changed. I think it was maybe a year and a half ago, it was 1,200, and then it was voted on to be changed to 1,500.
Is that just a reflection of inflation in general?
Yes, yes, because like normally the way that we have come up with that supportive service number, so with our ITAs, or even, because they get a supportive service when they're in a work experience or internship or anything like that. 3 years ago, cost of boots wasn't as much as what it is now. The books that they have to, when we do have someone that we help with books and things like that, one nursing book. And I just remember this clearly, 4 years ago, one of the nursing books was, I want to think it was like $189. Last year, it was 400 and something, the same book.
Same book.
So, and that's why we had, to adjust it. So, yeah, and not everybody uses that whole 1,500. We have a whole lot of people that whenever they come to us with support for supportive service needs, they just may need a good set of steel-toed work boots, because
Right.
we can get on the job that $150 work boots is a lot for someone that's not been working or is low income. So, yeah.
So you go by, there's a list of things that the money can be spent for, and you give that individual that list, and these are the things you can use this money for if you need it.
Well, we discuss with them, okay, so when an individual, say Michael comes in to me, and I'm his case manager, and I'm gonna try to help him find a job, or, obtain a credential, or things like that. I'm gonna go ahead and start talking to him at the beginning to see what his needs are. Is it something that we can help with? Now, if he needs help with his utility bill, while under federal law, we can pay someone's utility bill with our supportive service money. But I also know that Bluegrass Community Action Partnership has a wonderful utility. Community Action does also. So I'm gonna refer him to those. Under WILA law, there's a lot of things that the supportive service money can pay for, right? But we really try to keep our supportive service money to use it as the last resort. If there's a partner out there that can help with that, well, we'll do a work experience, but maybe you can help them with new tires, you know what I mean? Like Goodwill has a very good program too. So that's as far as supportive services stuff goes. So, yeah. Yeah, we just don't give them a list and say, ooh, pick one.
Usually, especially with the work experience, it's usually tied in something with work related.
Tools, boots, and uniforms.
So like, I'll give you an example, like one's like mechanic, like if they're going to a mechanic, to be a mechanic, then they may say, hey, look, you may need X, Y, Z amount of tools to get started with your job.
Mm-hmm.
So we just don't go in there all crazy and just spend $1,500 worth of tools. I mean, the mechanic may say, hey, look, these are some essential tools that this person may need to get started with the job.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go from there and help them purchase those tools.
Like specifically like for our electrical program with MTech, we know what the basic tools they are gonna need to be an electrical apprentice.
Yeah.
I think it's like
It's
$712.
$712.
$712. We know exactly that for them to get started as an electrical apprentice, they're gonna need $712 for tools. So we buy them that set of tools. So they specifically have what they need to get started. So it's like Rolly said, it's not like a wish list, kind of go through the Sears catalog and pick out everything you want. We work with employers to find out what do they need. And we find a lot, especially working with our recovery and reentry populations,
And
they just need the work boots.
right, and like we get, if it's something like the electricals, what Mike pointed out, we get a list from the company. We don't ask, like I wouldn't ask Michael, what do you think you need? I reach out to the company, you know, and say, what tools are required, right? If we have someone, like with our transitional employment, let's say we do have someone who's going into hospitality and they need non-slip boots, then we're gonna, non-slip shoes, then we're gonna reach out to that business that they're being placed at and say, okay, tell us exactly what kind they need. What is it exactly that they need? And we have that documentation in email form so that we can put it in the file for whenever the state comes in and monitors us, or if DOL comes in and monitors us, then they see the justification as to why we spent that money on that supportive service.
So some of them may only get $30, and some of them could use up to $1,500. So everybody's
Right.
different.
Are the businesses generally, the employers generally cooperative in working with us, and
Yeah.
they understand the benefits for them?
Yep.
Obviously, being able to.
Yep. And I will say our business service team has, you know, they've communicated enough and built enough trust to where whenever we do refer someone to a business, they know that we vetted them. We are, you know, the case managers, the TDSs, they have talked to them about showing up on time, how to communicate with others. Let's not get mad and just turn around and walk out in the middle of the shift, right? So the employers work well with us because they know that we're giving them good candidates that should be successful. And if something does happen, right? Let's say I'm working with Michael and I place him at Amtech, right? And he starts showing up late and all that stuff, then Willie or John's gonna call the TDS or the business service, you know, roll in and say, hey, I'm having a problem with Michael. Then we're gonna step in and try to see well, not we, our case managers, are gonna step in to see what's going on with Michael as to why he was doing good and then stuff went south. You know what I mean? So they're really good at giving us exactly what we need because they know that we vet people.
We try to have an open relationship with that, because it could also be vice versa too. I mean, the job seeker may come to us and be like, look,
Yeah.
I've been here and this place is not what I expected, and sometimes it kind of reflects back to the company. Those are sometimes hard conversations you have, you know, with businesses in the area and say, hey, look, 6 months ago, Dean, you had a conversation about why you have such a high turnover rate, or what, you know, you can't keep employees at your facility, and come to find out, getting some feedback from some of our job seekers and some of the people we play, this is why.
Okay.
So we need to vote.
Do it. Okay, the short-term training, same thing.
He went off, oh, he left already. Oops. Can we table it to the joint meeting, the final vote?
If he could come back on for like
30
2
seconds.
seconds.
Like, if he could log on literally fast enough to approve.
Yes.
Yeah, and listen, on the short-term training, the very last page, it's the only thing about for approval. That's the only thing on it.
Okay.
Yeah, if he could just literally log on for 5 seconds to approve it.
Yeah.
That's all we needed.
Okay.
Because I think we can get that motion to adjourn without it.
Does your motion need to specify each of these, or does it? No, it can just say the work experience.
Yep.
Or the.
Just approves policies.
Hi, this is Robin from the Leo meeting, and Judge West was just on the meeting with us, and I know he sent a message saying that he has to go to a groundbreaking. So we were wondering if he could come back on just for a minute to make one final vote before our meeting adjourns. Do you have a way to?
There you go.
Yeah.
They're always wrong.
That's right. Okay, perfect. And it's 599. Okay, perfect. I'll call him. Thank you. Just for 2 seconds.
If he doesn't pick up, we just keep calling him, he'll be like, whoa, everybody keeps calling me, what's going on?
My phone rang, and I apologize for that, I didn't turn the ringer off, and it said Bluegrass ad was calling me. I thought that was strange. Was that David, maybe? Or possibly somebody else here that, you know, is on the meeting.
And if we can't get him, I think that this was presented to the WIB board, so the WIB board has approved it, so if we can't get, if Judge West can't get back on, I believe, and Stacy can confirm, I believe that it will be okay because it was approved by the workforce board.
That's correct. Leo's, we always let you guys, make you guys aware of any changes like that. But as far as WIOA law, it won't hold us up for anything because it's only the WIB board that is required to make approval of policy changes. And typically we would have just put this under an informational item for you guys. But because of the way, because it was a special called meeting, we kept it under an action item. So we don't have to be held up if Judge West can't come back.
His phone did go directly to voicemail. I left a message for
I
him.
wonder what their groundbreak is.
So it takes time, hopefully.
I know.
So we're okay with this one, if we don't have a vote on this one, so we're
We
good.
defer to it, but we wanna follow through, and we can do it at September.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I guess we can vote to adjourn. Since it's a call meeting, we can't talk about anything other than what's on the agenda. I know that. I've been brutally educated about that. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, or I guess I can just declare that we're adjourned. We are adjourned, Judge Hamilton. We appreciate your attendance and hope everything's okay in Carlisle today.